What went wrong with Thoth? This could easily be part of the Whatever Happened series, but today we're doing a bit of a different take on a topic. What do I mean by what went wrong with him? Well, he's definitely not in a bad place. He's actually very high up in the meta currently. What I think isn't really fitting for him, or where he is somewhat misplaced and changed in weird ways, is in how his kit was originally intended to work and how it works today. And that's what I want to go into in this very video. For that, we need to look back at how he started and then how he developed over time with different changes to the character and in which place that let him end up today. Please understand that I'm not trying to say that it's necessarily bad that he is the way he is now, and I don't hate the character because of it, so this is by no means a rant. But I think that it just was a weird decision design-wise to bring him in that direction. I understand that for many people the direction he is in now is very nice and they enjoy the character being played in that way. I'm just gonna outline why I personally think that it's not ideal as for what the character was supposed to be. If you don't think that's the case, that's absolutely fine with me, just making sure you understand how the concept of this is meant to be. To understand where he currently stands in the meta, the best way is to just look at the pro scene games to see how much they value him. If we look at week 1 of the spring split, Thoth was banned in 75% of the games. In week 2, he was banned in 79% of the games. The source for this is Keyboard the Narwhal's thread on Reddit. It will be linked down below. To put that further in perspective, as in how much the god is actually banned, let's look at the 2 most banned gods. The most banned god across the first 2 weeks is Thoth with 77.5% ban. The second god on that list is Ratatoskr with a ban rate of 47.5%. So he has a 30% higher ban rate than the second best god at the moment, or the second highest valued god at the moment in the SPL. Now clearly the SPL doesn't count for everything, but you will also see this reflected in ranked, where he's banned a lot too. So overall we can say that Thoth is probably overperforming, or at least considered very strong and very annoying to deal with. It's especially important that he's notably more annoying to deal with than the next most annoying god, according to these bans. But that wasn't always the case. When Thoth originally came out, he was actually considered underwhelming by many because really his kit didn't offer all too much. At the same time, back then his kit had a very clear concept. He was a low mobility, long range, low CC mage. He didn't have big AoEs by any means, but very long ranged abilities, very long ranged poke and clear, but also his ultimate with a long range, all being extended by the 3. A very long cooldown on his escape. It was originally actually 18 seconds and meant that basically if you aggress with it, you're putting yourself at high risk. And the only CC he had was the slow, also in his escape, which had a very long cooldown. And that pretty much outlines the idea. The thought process here was for him to fight from a long distance, poke enemies from out of distance, position himself very safely so that he would not get poked out by enemies or even aggressed on, so he would save his escape, and then potentially use his escape as a mean of clearing up a kill if there is no other way anymore. Back then, the cooldown of his escape was actually so long that I recommended building cooldown boots instead of pen boots, due to the free pen that he gets, in order to get some cooldown on the escape and be able to use it in fights without being immediately punished for it. That was changed when he first got a buff in November. In patch 3.22, he got a cooldown reduction on evade and punish the more he leveled it, going from 16 seconds, so already a decrease over the 18 seconds he had initially, down to 12 seconds. This made him a lot more mobile, allowed him to use his escape a lot more aggressive, especially if you had some CDR and you could bring it down to less than 10 seconds, and really changed up the playstyle already. So he was now still a long range character. He still didn't have any hard CC, but he had the slow, and the slow was on lower cooldown, and also his escape was much more, well, usable and not as risky to use. You didn't have to consider as much when you would use it, because oftentimes it would be off cooldown again for you to use whenever you needed it. Because what you have to keep in mind with this escape is, while it is a dash, which is not necessarily the best escape, it also has an incredibly long range if you place his 3, and it's also a multi-directional dash, which is generally very, very strong. Allows you to, for example, do the trick where you put a portal or 3 in front of you walk forward through it and the enemy will chase you thinking he will get you, and then all of a sudden go backwards through that same wall, portal, whatever you want to call it, and go far back behind the enemy where he cannot follow you because he totally didn't expect you going that direction anyways without turning around. So essentially he went from being a low mobility mage to at least a medium if not high mobility mage. That's already a very significant difference in how the character is played. But it didn't end there. Next, Hieroglyphic Assault got a little bit of a speed increase to the projectile, Evade and Punish got a bit of a bigger width, and Glyph of Pain got a mana cost reduction, making it much more spammable as well. Beforehand you were punished a little bit for using it too much because it had 60 mana cost. Now it actually scaled up from 25 to 45, which is a lot less. Allowed him to use his abilities a lot more. Once again, he already had that quicker escape. Really nothing that essentially changed here, but made him a lot more fluid. And I think this was actually one of the buffs I could get behind because it really helped him facilitate the playstyle that he already had before. The next change was where it got questionable. At this point, Thoth was already performing decently, in my opinion. There obviously are people who disagree with that, who thought he was too weak, he was not picked enough, but I don't think he was bad by any means. He was a bit cheesy because a lot of his kit depended on him just one-shotting people with the ultimate with ridiculous amounts of damage. But, well, that's how it was until that point. The February patch changed that a lot. In patch 4.1, Evade and Punish no longer slowed, but stunned instead. Now, this was a 1 second stun that would actually pass through multiple enemies and stun multiple enemies if they were in a line. Glyph of Pain also got a damage increase for allies. Nothing major there, but still a nice benefit. Final Judgment, on the other hand, saw a decrease in both base damage as well as scaling. The base damage went down by 40, whereas the scaling went up by 20%. The cooldown was also increased by 15 seconds. It went from 75 seconds to 90 seconds. This essentially made him a new character. He now had pretty much everything. He had the relatively high mobility, he had the very long range, he still had good damage overall, and he had hard CC. And that's where you gotta wonder what the design idea of the character really was, or how he was supposed to be originally and how he went to this place. Because all the downsides that he was developed with in return for his high damage and long range were essentially removed. The character still wasn't all about big AoE ultimates, so he's still not the perfect character. He's not a Poseidon Kraken ulting guy with extremely high mobility, but the downsides to his kit overall were pretty much all removed or evened out to make him more of a very basic character that doesn't really differ too much from others. He still has that extra range over other characters, obviously, which is a benefit that will not go away, but there are other characters with decent range or long range ultimates such as Ra or Janus, and we can't completely take them out of the picture when talking about the playstyle of gods because many of them already feel somewhat similar, especially with the sniping ults. Thoth originally stood out a lot, but by these changes he actually just became much more of a normal mage. You would not go for any janky builds with him, you would just go for any default mage build and probably do very well with that. And he didn't really have much of a downside in terms of where he was lacking beforehand. In March, he got a small nerf in patch 4.3. Evade and Punish would now stop on the first target hit instead of going through multiple targets. Now, I honestly didn't even know that the stun would go through multiple targets till around January. And I didn't really realize that is a mechanic that many people would make use of. The main core essential part of the stun is that it is a stun that stuns a single target out and allows you to burst that target. And I think that's how most people use it in the end. I might be wrong here, there may have been some exceptions to that rule, but generally I would not say that he was very much dependent on that. And the question now is obviously, why does he have that stun? I do not think that many people actually like the stun. I've talked to a lot of people who play Thoth, and even they don't like the stun, and these are people who main Thoth and play him on the highest level of play partially. But I'm sure there are a few people out there who would defend the stun and think that he needed that for some reason, which I'm completely unsure about what that reason would be because he was not underperforming beforehand, but so be it. Now the question is, if he has that stun, then how do you change the character so that he falls more in line with others? Because you would have to nerf him in some other places. For example, you could attack the range. You could take down his longer range than other characters. But that would put him even more in line with any other mage. It would make him even less unique, and that is exactly where I feel the game should not be heading. I think that his original design, being too weak, was still a lot more unique, and it would have been nice to just build on that and maybe do something with the 3 especially, maybe something to the 1, just to allow him to have that long range, relatively high dangerous poke, but also be punished for being out of position and just having to position himself really well in team fights. Unfortunately, that did not happen. That's not what we're seeing at the moment, and we will see how he develops down the road. I hope that at least the stun will go away, or that some other change makes up for it without taking away more of the uniqueness that the character had. With that, thank you guys for watching. Also, if you want to stop by my stream or you're watching this video right after it came out, I'm streaming on Twitch TV/DukeSloth right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, feel free to do so. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.